our school book. So I wrote everything except that I wanted to become a pilot. I wrote about my dream of starting my NGO, everything except that I wanted to become a pilot. And after my result came, class 12th, and I started my coaching for pilot, I read that. And I was shocked. I was like, it does not say I want to become a pilot. It just says that I need pilot as a step to go forward with something bigger. So I applied for Air Asia, and I said to one of my friends that if this does not come to a conclusion, I'm going to, become a lawyer as I wanted to become as a child. So it did not, but it was too late. I had not given anything as such, and I had not prepared for any exams or anything. So I started researching a lot. While researching, I realized what were my key interests. So I have always been interested in co-empowerment of women. And once I started realizing that I want to have a bigger impact, I want to impact world, then I thought of global affairs as something which is very multidisciplinary, as well as it gives a very huge concepts in a simpler way to how we can bring policy change in grassroots by working on something bigger. So when my college just started, I started working with UN for climate change. So climate change started when I was in 11th grade. Something I still remember, something that I was most excited about was to conduct seminars. That's something that I liked. So everybody conducted seminar on technology and how AI is going to take over the world, and I did it on climate change. Something that is going to kill us all. So I was 16 years old when I watched Before the Flood, and Before the Flood changed my viewpoint, for the world. I just wanted climate change to stop. I wanted this to come to an end. I did not understand why leaders were not doing it. So, which got me to choose a Greenpeace as my first internship. I did not take Think India. That was the time I made a choice as, okay, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do something that everybody else is doing for their CV. I want to do something that takes me to grassroots. I went to the first time I went to a slum. It was something that changed my mind, and I realized that this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to impact. Right now, I'm working on research related to underrepresentation of women in judiciary. When everybody, in my class also chooses to take topics on what is very important for our society, I always end up choosing feminism, or how the world impacts women, or how society changes with women representation. And my second topic is always climate change.
So from a pilot to a lawyer to policy change. I mean, that is like the whole world in one career decision. That's nice. I'm going to circle back on that once we also hear everybody's views. Himakshi, I remember our first conversation like 13, 14 years ago. And you were at that time deciding which professional college to take. And I remember a typical that confusion all over, but hey, I know what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
From there, I've seen you mature into this very sure, and then you went to Harvard and you had a job in this top company. Was it Bain or BCG? Which one was that? BCG, which is a dream job for the kind of students I work with, and they would give an arm and leg to be in these amazing places. But then you left all of that to start Indian School of Democracy. So tell us the genesis of all that, and why would you do something like this?
Thank you for having me. I think it's difficult to follow Ishita because she's 19 and she's already so clear about her interests. But I'm going to try because when I was 17, 18, I was really confused. What I knew is that I don't want to be an engineer and a doctor, though I was also a science student. And the reason I didn't want to be an engineer or a doctor is because most people in my family were doctors or engineers. But also what they were is teachers. So even my grandfather was a teacher. My father, though an engineer, was a lecturer at some point. Same with my aunt. So at every point, people in my life had been teachers, and I had seen the power of education at home. So people would do different jobs, but at the end of it, my grandfather sold so much to educate his children. And when we had enough, there was always this conversation at home about giving to people who probably can't afford it, but giving them the tool of education, and not just food or anything, but the tool of education. I think that value is something my grandfather instilled in us very, very strongly. So when I went to a liberal arts college, I went to Flame. We could study anything, and I had thought I will study computer science and economics. But the beauty of liberal arts is that it really lets you explore. So I was exploring religion and filmmaking and physics and chemistry. But what spoke most to me was sociology and anthropology and political science. So I ended up doing a double major eventually. One was in literary and cultural studies, which really gave me a grounding in political philosophy and how the world has evolved over a period of time. And I studied a lot of higher education policy through those tools. And my other major was marketing, which I don't speak about because I feel like I don't identify with it at all anymore. And after that, I think the seed of education was so strongly planted in me that I did not sit for campus placements, though I was the coordinator for placements. I ended up doing Teach for India, which some of you may have heard about. At that time, it was very new. So I was teaching in government school in Mumbai, and it's called Teach for India, but I feel like it should be called Learn for India, because every single teacher and my fellow, we were all learning so much by the difficult situation that our students were in. They had rooms the size of our bathrooms, and yet they showed up, and their parents had it in them to show. And once they were in the classroom, they were like any other kid. They were like me when I was in third grade. So those 2 years, I would say, were transformational for me because they taught me what I care most about. And I had 41 students in my classroom, but because I was a macro level thinker, I enjoyed policy. I was imagining what is the situation of 300 or 400 million children in the country. And I knew policy or politics and intervention at a macro level is what is going to change the reality of many children. Because I was teaching in third grade. I'll just share one story, though it will go a little long. My neighborhood classroom was a teacher, a government school teacher, who would do nothing, write a few spellings on the board, and then ask the kids to write 100 times. She asked them to write the spelling of shoes as SHOOS, and these kids were writing these spellings 100 times. And this, I knew, this was in Bombay. So even in government schools, there's a gradation. A Bombay school versus a village school, Bombay school is going to be way better. And this, in a Bombay school, my neighborhood teacher was writing shoes as SHOOS and making the child write it 100 times. Forget rote learning, etc. Just the fundamentals were so messed up, and no one had ever visited this classroom for them to even know what was wrong. To cut a long story short, I think like my interest in education and systems change just got more stronger and stronger, because I knew a lot of people do not have the choice to stand up for themselves, but it's the duty of the citizens who can, and the government, to stand up for them and do the right thing. So I continued to work in policy making. Then I went to do my master's at Harvard in public policy as well. And while I was doing my master's, I was doing a program called Harvard Square to Oval Office, which trains women to become politicians. And I was like, this is it. In 10 years, I'm going to be a politician because I want to impact policy. I really want to eradicate poverty for the country. But I came back. So I was also very clear, I'll come back to India. So I ensured that I got a scholarship. Otherwise, I would not have been able to follow my dreams. I came back and I did not want to work in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, because everyone who has had my privilege wants to work in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Calcutta, Chennai, like 5-6 cities, right? So I joined Boston Consulting Group, but I was working in Odisha, which has a lot of tribals in their country. They have 60,000 schools, 1 crore children, 2 lakh teachers, and the education levels are not so good. So I joined BCG, but to use my problem solving and analytical skills again, for the purpose of systems reform in education, and got to do some amazing things, but I was moving far from the people, which I did not like. So I was sitting in government offices, making all these big policies, but I could barely get time to listen to what people were doing. And I realized that political motivation either makes a state or breaks a state, and that's not okay. We need politicians who are really thinking about the most vulnerable population. That means the best and the smartest people, like all of you here, need to be in those positions. So that's how I started Indian School of Democracy, which essentially is a platform which nourishes young people to become principled leaders who will get into politics and hopefully change the country, change the way democracy is experienced by every citizen of the country. Yeah, that's what I do.
What a fabulous journey from where you were to where Indian School of Democracy has begun. And I know how much you're doing in this space. There's such a big hole and a vacuum in this whole system that I hope schools like IST plug in and provide a new pathways to career. So brilliant, amazing stuff. So Jonathan, your story, you also, again, I remember reading your bio, and we are connected through my colleague Ruben, who's your class fellow from VJTI, right? You did your engineering at VJTI Bombay.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you also worked, but then you are now doing grassroots work on education. So talk to us about your journey and your work at BareFoot Foundation.
Sure. So it's quite interesting, and people often ask me this question: what made you leave engineering and transition into the sector? And what I keep pointing out is that engineering needs to rebrand itself as a way of thinking, right? And it's not that if one is not working in the conventional space of engineering, that they've left engineering behind in any way, right? So in fact, when I graduated from BJTI as a civil engineer, I joined the construction field, and on the sites, two things happened. First, I felt that it was a little odd that we were interacting so much with people. We were trying to build for people, and we were using people in the process itself, but we had never formally understood the nuances of people. Like, we had never studied sociology or psychology or anything like that in our engineering. So that was one thing, and that was just going through my head. And the second was there was a considerable amount of material wastage on the sites. And we could have allowed for that wastage to happen the way that we had taught to codify in the international standards. But I thought that we need to get into a little deeper understanding of why there's so much material wastage. And so I started working with the laborers. Working with them, I noticed that all of this wastage stemmed from their lack of understanding of geometry, right? So instead of cutting maybe 3 to 4 pieces out of one sheet of granite, they were able to fit just 3 pieces or 2 pieces because they could not position it or anticipate how it could fit. And while working with them, I realized my predilection for teaching, and I also realized that it was a little late to be intervening at this stage, right? So invariably, when you start any form of education with laborers, especially migrant laborers, they are interested for you to teach their children. And that was the first time I encountered children who did not have the fine motor skills to hold a pencil, nor the attention span to even listen to instruction. So I knew that something had to be done, and I knew that I loved learning, loved teaching, and the education sector would be able to really combine these two interests that I had with that burning passion inside me to advance my privileges to someone else. So yeah, having felt all of this, I knew that something had to be done, but had absolutely no idea how to go about doing it. So I did a little research about different courses that are out there, different universities, and anything that could enable me. And I came across the Young India Fellowship at Ashoka University. So reading through the website, I discovered that they literally teach you everything about the machinery which makes a government work or which makes a country run, right? From sociology to politics, economics, fundamentals of science, etc. And during the span of the Young India Fellowship, that's where my co-founder Soumya and I began BareFoot. We, again, having no experience in the education sector at the time, decided to go right at the grassroots and teach. And we said, let's teach everywhere. Let's teach in for-profit schools, extremely high-end schools, schools like DPS, schools that were run by Teach for India and Akansha, Digital Empowerment Foundation, basically anything that we could enter, because we wanted to see the extremities of the diverse classrooms that existed out there. And we saw one common thread through all of those. The teachers kept blaming students for coming to their class in this condition, and they said there's only so much that we could do in a span of 1 year. I mean, if we're in the 7th standard and a child doesn't know how to read yet, how can we help this child catch up with the rest of their peers? And I thought that was a very valid argument that the teachers put forward. I mean, they were teachers at the end of the day, not magicians, right? So we kept tracing back from the 8th standard to the 7th, and we landed up in the 1st standard, where teachers said that even in the 1st standard, students came to our class without the requisite skills to start learning. And that really beat us, like, because we had no idea who had to take responsibility before the 1st standard. And we stumbled upon this massive system called Anganwadis. It's the largest preschooling system in the world, and it's run by the government. They're nutritional centers, and they're supposed to also provide early childhood education. But because early childhood education was not a topic, it was something that even escaped our lens. It was very difficult for people to know exactly how children developed and how to stimulate them in those early years. And that's how BareFoot moved from teaching in classrooms, creating experiential workshops for students, into really working on creating a stimulating environment for children in their early years, when 90% of their brain develops. So that's pretty much the trajectory on how I went from a construction site to running BareFoot.
Okay, fascinating journey. That's like going really lowest of the low foundational years of education for someone who really has no resource. So that must be mighty challenging. So now that we have heard what you're trying to do, here is the money question of this webinar. We'll start with Ishita and then Hemakshi and Jonathan. Ishita is still studying, so you may not be able to give this particular thing. But the question I have for Hemakshi and you, Jonathan, is that, hey, we go to a corporate life, there's a salary, there is all that stuff. So do your jobs also give you that entire stuff? So we'll talk about that. But here's a question for Ishita. Ishita, are there any 2 or 3 suggestions you can give to teenagers? Because I work with a lot of teenagers. I know that the compassion in youngsters is a lot more than adults. And by nature, I've seen a child naturally inclined to help people, naturally inclined to serve someone else. Unfortunately, then comes the education system and the society, which takes away those compassion and makes you a little bit more selfish, and rightly so. There's no debate on this. Everybody deserves a good life, so we're not debating that. But the question I have for you is that you are at 19, you're very clear, this is what I want to do. Can you give 2 or 3 suggestions of teenagers who are 16, 17, 18? Maybe a course they could do on this area, maybe an internship or a project, so that they go back from this webinar with some bouquet options that they could explore for their teenagers. So we'll start with you, Ishita.
Hi. So I would actually say that if you are very passionate about something, then you should first go and do the work that is required on the base level. So until and unless you know, if for example, if I'm very passionate about climate change and I feel I can, you know, change the world, until and unless I don't go for the protest, I don't go for the research, I don't, you know, show up, I won't know what's exactly happening. So this happened with me when I started working with Greenpeace. There was this invitation that we got to work on grassroots level. It was not related to my internship. It was related to Dilli Ko Dhadakne Do. So it was about pollution, and we wanted to aware people as well as make them just sign a slip. It was just name and sign that you want better policies for pollution. So once I went there, I saw it. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to change these things. They knew what was happening. And I always thought that, you know, once I'm on stage, once I'm, you know, telling people that this is what is happening, they're going to listen. And I was literally shouting that you are going to die, but nobody cared. So that time I realized that one of the fundamental things to do when you feel very passionate about something is to go and try it out on your own, to, you know, do the research. And I saw a lot of courses in IGNOA. I went around 3-4 months back. I thought that I could do some, you know, additional courses to my course, but my course is so interdisciplinary that I don't get space to add on to it. But you can, even if you're doing, bachelor's in pol science or philosophy or whatever your choice of career is, you can still go and work with these people and, just try add on to your list of knowledge by taking courses. Like Ignua had a lot of courses related to social work and related to human resources, what exactly was needed on the ground. So, just to know what's exactly happening. Apart from that, you can also choose for fellowships. So something that changed entirely the way I looked at everything was Democracy Express. So, when I actually thought that I'm not going to get selected, I've not done anything much. But when I went there, I saw there were people who wanted to change. I always thought that I'm the only one because around me, nobody cared about all these things. What teenagers around me cared about was who is going to buy the, most expensive car, or who is going to date so-and-so or go to so-and-so parties. So I always felt out of the box. But when I went to Democracy Express, I actually realized how can we change things on grassroots? How can we have better leaders? And what is the need of the hour? When I wrote what kind of India I wanted on the last day, when I wrote what Ishita would feel 1 year later, made me cry. Just, the thought of how perfect things can be, but they are not. Just the thought that I can contribute so much, but I'm not doing it. So that's something that I would always suggest to research, to go to the grassroots for your passion, to join fellowships. And even there are, if you want to do your bachelor's in something related to social work, you can go to public universities as well as private university. So Ashoka, Jindal, they are, probably, they are offering a lot of courses related to this. But there's this, but DU as well as Jamia and B.R. Ambedkar, they are, offering courses related to this. Even MIT is offering online courses related to this. Few months back, I was trying to get in contact and they had really good offers. And there's this One Future collective that right now I'm having workshops with. So they talk about feminist leadership. So, once you get into it, once you start researching, then you keep on finding out things. For example, if you are interested in climate change, you can join webinars that are going on right now by following pages like Greenpeace, or even they are more like Delhi Dhadakne Do. So they have things that they are working on. If you're interested in politics, so Democracy Express, they keep on having, group discussions on same. So I think it's just, it's about going depth, going into it, just diving in. That's it. And I would suggest.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think there's plenty of options. One thing, Ishita, you could do is that somewhere in the webinar, either in the chat, or you could compile a list of resources and send it to me.
Sure.
We anyway summarize this blog and we'll put those lists so that somebody would benefit. So Democracy Express, IGNO, any other fellowships you have, 10 things, send it to us and we'll compile it for our listeners.
Sure.
Hemakshi, question bang on the money. Is there money, salary, how are you surviving? How do you pay your bills? Let's come to the most important thing of everybody wants to listen to this only.
So the myth is that we don't get paid or we are jholawalas. It is exactly that. It's a myth. There is a huge gap in salary. Like what I was earning at BCG versus what I'm earning now has a huge difference, but it has enough for me to be safe, and not just be safe, be happy. I do take international holidays. I do travel in India when I can. I have enough to help people, donate to other organizations as well. So social sector now, look at it as a sector, right? Just like there's engineering, there's law, there's banking. Think of it as a full-fledged sector. There are thinkers, there are funders. Only if we think of it that way will we start giving it the seriousness it deserves.
Yeah.
The only difference, I think, which is a benefit, is that it has a lot of purpose. You will read blogs about people who, like Warren Buffett, etc. I was reading a blog about Warren Buffett, who was at some point the richest man in the world and is now in top 3 as well. He said love and meaning and purpose are what you need in life. If you don't have that, reconsider your life choices. And social sector by default gives you that, because you get purpose. As humans, we are wired to help people. It just gives you an opportunity on a platter to do that. So why not take it, right? And research also shows that after a certain income level, money does not add to your happiness. And social sector now luckily gives you that much money, which makes you comfortable if you have the skills. Think of it as a problem solving, right? If I'm a NASA engineer, I'm solving a problem about space and designing something. It's a problem solving skill. What is more exciting to solve a social problem around us, right? Like why are private schools so good but government schools not good? What are the different elements involved in it? So if problem solving is of interest to you, social sector has so many opportunities and real-time impact. You learn so much, constantly learning. There's no stagnancy. You're surrounded by the best people. And I have friends in the private sector, and I think they're also very happy. We need the NASA engineers for the world to be what it is. But I think there is a sense of camaraderie and community that social sector gives, which is a certain value system. So I think to answer the question in short, there is money, there's enough money, but the added perks are that you have a brilliant set of community, some of the smartest and most driven people, and you also have a sense of purpose, which will take you so much longer in life and really give you connection with yourself, which is so important.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think the 3 things you said are absolutely brilliant. I'm going to take a question later, but I'll tell you the question right now. That jump from BCG to where you are, it was definitely not like this, right? It was definitely not like this also. It was quite a big thing. It takes guts to do that. So I'm going to ask that question because that's where everybody stops. कि यार मिल रहा है पैसा चलता है, 1 more year. But someone like you said, to hell with it, let me jump, which is a big risk, and then the future is uncertain. So let's talk about that in the next question. So now I'll switch the gears to Jonathan. Jonathan's pretty much a similar question to you. Give us your view. Need not be the same or agreeing. Uh, what is your view on a career in working with grassroots? Are you able to pay your bills? Again, a devil's advocate question. One of the questions I always get asked is that all the people in the social sector are rich pots who now are helping the poor. And that, I know it's a myth, but I want to hear from all of you as well. Tell us your views about this entire concept.
Sure. I think Hemakshi really captured the essence of the passion or the meaning element that comes out of working in the sector. So in order to not be repetitive, I'll take a more cognitive approach to this, right? So the development sector is also a developing sector, right? There's so many jobs that are being created, there are types of jobs. And I would say that the development sector spans a spectrum from the grassroots to policy change, right? Or systemic change. And in between, you have a plethora of different types of jobs. So Ashish Dhawan also points out that if the last 20 years of India was economic development, the next 20 years needs to be social development in order to have that same economic growth, right? Because you need the country developing. You can't have a portion of people developing. And that's why there are people in the sector who are passionate about it. And there are people who are investing in the sector, not donating to the sector, but investing in the sector. So keeping that in mind, you have a lot of CSRs, a lot of philanthropists who also know that you need to carry the country with you. You can't just go in isolation to that extent. And with the formulation of Section 8 companies, it deems that the company is doing not-for-profit work, but the employees of the company are still employees of a company, right? And you can formally get paid, you can disclose your salary, and you can get funders who are okay with you taking a salary, right? They don't require you to work without any money, or they don't expect you to come into the sector having a load of money with you. So keeping that in mind, just like in any job, you need to justify a salary, right? So one cannot expect to be in a classroom say teaching 10 children and drawing a phenomenal salary. It's just not justifiable. But let's say you're in that classroom and you're teaching just a handful of children and you document your teaching processes to a very high degree. You then use your classroom to become a lab classroom, which influences change in a lot more classrooms. You then collect data from those classrooms and put it all together and use this to affect advocacy or policy change. You're now affecting change at a systemic level by being in that classroom, right? And then all of a sudden you can justify a large salary for being in that classroom. So whatever people do in whatever sector, as long as it's justifiable, as long as you don't have to, as long as you're not embarrassed to call it out, right? There will be a whole bunch of people who are willing to support you in your endeavor. It's also a vision or that long-term aim that people support, right? So my personal view is that funders are not interested in the activities that you're currently doing right now, but what kind of large-scale impact are your activities going to lead to? And again, if it's justifiable, it's there. It's definitely not comparable to the corporate sector. You would expect, say, maybe you would definitely expect a decline in the income that you would be getting in the corporate sector. But I would say that if money is really important to someone who's in the sector, right? You can expect maybe 70% of what you would be earning in the corporate sector. Again, if you put your mind to it and you're able to justify it. But again, then if money is not the driving factor, you'll see that a lot of people voluntarily dip into their own salaries to make sure that the intervention improves in quality. But this again is by choice, not out of compulsion.
Makes sense. I also feel that one of the points that you mentioned, and this is something I want to talk to all of you, because COVID-19 is a absolutely brilliant case study where we cannot talk about economy, country without also talking about everybody in the system. I mean, this
Right.
exodus of migrants is a serious issue, and if not addressed very well, would collapse the economy of the country, which means we as a country sitting in Delhi, Bombay, Gurgaon, wherever, Pune, Canada, have to also think about the migrant worker coming from Odisha and Bihar and Telangana and Bihar, because at some point of time, all of us are connected. And C.K. Prahlad wrote the book of Bottom of the Pyramid, which was one of the first books that was documented on that. But the latest Nobel Prize duo, Esther Duflo and Ar- is it Arnab?
It's bad.
Sorry?
Abhijit Banerjee.
Yeah,
Abhijit Banerjee.
and one of the books is Poor Economics, which is very well documented on this. And Amartya Sen also has very openly talked about how you have to connect top to bottom. There is the billionaires club, and then there is the entire workforce. And if you connect the dots, there is value for everyone. I mean, social sector doesn't mean the socialism concept, which was of the 16th century. It is an enterprise, and a social enterprise applies all the techniques a private enterprise would do. There is a profit and loss, there is a value creation. Value creation could be revenue as justified by costs minus profits, or it could be impact on education. And I think you brought that out very well. This is a good time for our participants who are listening to us to fire questions. I will take them one by one in the chat window. You could either privately chat with me if you are concerned, or you can just do it openly. Few questions have come in. I'll take them one by one. One more round of questions to my participants, because I think these are questions you would want to know. Ishita, do you see a future in this sector, or do you think after 5-10 years you might change and come to corporate sector? Which means, do you have flexibility to move around, which somebody would think through when they decide their careers? Like, one of the things people do engineering degree courses and MBA is to be able to move around flexibly. So does the social sector, from your view, give you that flexibility? Can you move back and forth and have all kinds of benefits anybody would have?
So I personally think that the reason why I was able to choose within a day that I don't want to become a pilot, I want to become a lawyer, or I don't want to do this, was the very fact that I have kept my boundaries very flexible. I am still saying that if there's something better, if there's a job that, could give me more fulfillment, could, make me, help me impact more people. It could be, being a novelist. It could be anything. I'm open to it. So, the very fact that now we are not living in the world. Nobody knew that COVID-19 is going to happen. So we are living in this world that nothing is certain. So I can't just, surely say that I'm going to do this, and after that, this. I'm very flexible with my approach. But with social sector, I would say that, I would like to give one example to this. So there's this therapist in my college that I met, and we were just, discussing randomly that, okay, what kind of cases do you have related to, women violence, or, the domestic violence of women, or maybe sexual assault cases. What kind of cases do you have? I was just doing a random discussion. So he told me that after college, he actually goes and, talks to rape survivors, and he's, like doing a full-time job there as well as doing it here. And now he's thinking to start his NGO wherein, he tries to have a clear, or you could say a clean slate to these women. So, while I was talking to him, I realized that there's nothing like one career, one thing that we stick to. I am planning to do law after this, after my bachelor's. So if I'm trying to do law after this, I can actually start my own NGO which deals with, fighting cases of sexual assault or whatever. So I think my whole thing is very flexible. And something that came to my mind that, changed everything was one line that I heard Michelle Obama say. She said that, it's not a time that you become something and you become. That's not the case. You don't become doctor and just it's done. There, we actually keep on becoming something every day. We are, it's not just a career that gives us everything. It's more to life that is, it's more like a journey that we are traveling. It's not a path that's made. It's a path that we are curving around. That's something that I believe in.
Yeah, I think that part I'm fairly convinced, and we talk about it in our School of Meaningful Experiences, that your generation, Ishita, and I'm talking as if I'm old, but we are old. We are in the old generation category. Your generation will touch to 90, 95 years. Death can come any second, but you will live long. And if your horizons are so high or long, your careers can't be a 10-year discussion, and your careers will be shifting every 10, 20 years, which means if you have 70 more ahead, productive years ahead of you, you could become a lawyer, you could become an author, a poet, a dancer, entrepreneur. Maybe 5 years you'll be like, okay, I'm not going to do anything and travel all around the world. It's possible for your generation. And this is something my generation did not have, because the country we were in was still growing. My parents wanted to do hajar things but sacrifice so that we got the benefits. But I think I'm glad to see that teenagers like you are doing it, and I encourage everybody in the webinar to let their teenagers do whatever they want, because they can always do whatever else they want given the beauty of opportunities we all have today. And do that. So great answer, Ishita. Hemakshi, your view. Tell us the trajectory of School of Democracy. How do you see yourself 10, 20, 30 years? What if, I mean, devil's advocate, plan B, plan C. Do you even think about these things?
Oh, all the time. I think and this was instilled in me, the success metric for a nonprofit is to cease to exist. It should be in their plan to not exist, because that means the problem is solved. So most good nonprofits are planned in a way that they should stop existing. So both my co-founder and I we hope Indian School of Democracy continues to exist for years, decades, and centuries. But I think I want to be in it for 15 years. After that, I'm really interested in becoming a farmer. I want to be a teacher. I'm interested in Buddhism. And Harari said this, right? He's one of the finest thinkers of our times. He said, we are going to have multiple careers, at least 3 or 4 careers. And I'm very convinced about it. I don't think of, like, I'm not married to Indian School of Democracy. Yes, I'm super passionate about it. I'm going to serve it till it needs me. But at some point, it won't need me. So I'm going to move on. At some point, I won't need it because it won't fulfill my life's purpose at that time. So I will definitely move on after doing what I need to do. But I think what I want to talk about is the original question of flexibility. And I know nowadays all of us hear 21st century skills being used a lot, but I want to talk about what are those 21st century skills, right? Collaboration, communication, critical thinking, leadership. And literally, I think social sector gives you a chance to do all of that. And employers in future are not going to look at degrees. Actually, they're going to look at these skills, and social sector gives you an opportunity to build these skills so much faster. We hear stories about corporate moving to the social, which is great. I think the world needs that. But I know so many stories of people from the social sector also at some point, if they want to move to the social sector, given benefit of doubt and given the benefit in the corporate sector, because their skills of people, collaboration, critical thinking are valued a lot. So don't think of it, oh, I'm doing anyone a favor. You are actually, by working in the social sector, developing skills that no school and college can give you, and sometimes even corporate jobs just can't give you. But by working in the social sector, you are developing the 21st century skills. So it definitely gives a lot of flexibility to move from one to the other, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think social sectors are truly multidisciplinary sectors. They are the only sectors that do not look at a silo-based thinking. If you have to solve environment problem, you can't take away engineering, manufacturing from the environment and solve that problem. So it's truly the only multidisciplinary. In fact, I'm connected to all these universities because one of my ambitions in life is to look at what do we teach in a school, because what we are teaching is definitely not going to work. So you look at very different concepts, and there are many schools and colleges who are trashing the old way of system and saying we are going to get a pupil inside our school, college, university, and they will solve a problem in the world, which could be whatever: water, pollution, safety, education. Now that problem is an ocean of a problem. Now you go figure out what you have learned. And there is a tribe, and all of you used this concept, which is a tribe of people who come together and you all become, focused in that journey. So I'm very keen, and I'm very sure that this is one big thing social sector provides that none of the other sectors can even dream of coming close. Like a 20-year experience in a engineering sector is like maybe 2 days in a social sector. I mean, you learn so much, and within a year you have achieved so much, which is not even worth a lifetime. So I agree with that. Jonathan, a question to you. Ishita, Hemakshi, there's a pattern in your thinking that you're all very clear in your minds, and sometimes many of us are very confused. Should we do it? Should we not do it? So given your perspective, were you very clear from your childhood, or was it something that happened and you then jumped into this career proposition? My question has a hidden agenda. The hidden agenda is, does a career in social sector require clarity like how you have in other sectors, or can it be like, oh yeah, I don't know, I'll just figure it out?
So I think what Hemakshi mentioned is really important, that the aim of an organization should be cascading redundancy, right? You should eventually plan to step out. But I'd like to jump in there with like a small like personal thought, that I feel that an organization should not move towards cascading the redundancy, but an intervention should. Right? I would assume that every single country in the world has not-for-profits, irrespective of how conventionally developed or progressed we talk about it, right? So I feel that just in the span of me working in BareFoot itself, I've moved from being an educator to an educator trainer, and now to an institution builder, right? Because I believe that there are some institutions that need to be there, that evolve and adapt as the challenge keeps adapting, right? Education a month ago was very different from what education in the next month is going to be with COVID about here, right? We need to get technology in the development sector, whether we think that technology plays a role in education or not. I feel it's not optional anymore. Where COVID is the first of a lot of changes that we're going to be seeing. And there's political instability, there's economic depression, there's climate change that's all coming about. And I think that education is going to look very different through each of these massive epochs. One of the reasons why I'm in the sector and what has stayed the same all throughout is that I get a lot of satisfaction from the work, right? And what my co-founder and I keep talking about is that we're not married to our idea, we're not married to the organization, and we don't have clarity about what we're doing. But we know that one thing is clear, that we're going to enjoy the work that we're doing. And the moment we stop enjoying it or it ceases to enjoy to a certain bit, we need to revisit what we're doing, right? Because there's beauty in the entire process, not just the end result. And the end result, we may not even see it in our lifetime. So cutting through all the philosophy, no one does not require clarity in the development sector. And I feel there's this imposter syndrome that everyone tends to inhabit at some point in their life, right? Whether the corporate or the development sector, where people treat you like an expert when you're the most distant thing from an expert that there is. There are times when we start an intervention, and just after starting the intervention, we realize, oh, there's so much more thought that can be put into it. And that intervention, which we were very proud of a couple of weeks ago, suddenly needs massive change, right? So I think what's important is that no matter what you're doing, because if money is not going to be a motivator over here, happiness and meaning definitely needs to be. And as long as you never know what's the best opportunity that exists, right? You never know the pinnacle of your potential.
Yeah.
But I think a very simple metric that we can apply for ourselves is this the best opportunity that I have access to, and am I happy doing it? And if those two metrics are ticked, we're definitely not going to look back on it with regret.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think I agree with that. We have about 10 minutes, and I want to use our audience questions. If there are more, we'll take with your permission. Mansi wants to ask a question. Either three of you, one of you could answer. Where should I start if I'm interested in feminism? Anybody would like to say some pointed suggestions for Mansi?
I can
Ishita,
do it. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, please.
So I would say, first of all, feminism is very vast. Just short it down. So what exactly are you interested in? Are you interested in working for LGBTQ? Are you interested in working for women? Are you interested, and what sector of women? Are you interested to go to the grassroots? Are you interested to work in leadership? And once you have what the idea that you need, you just go online and start searching for NGOs that are working for it. So last semester, I was giving this interview for an internship to an organization who works for rape victims, I mean rape survivors, sorry. And it was something that caught my eyes was it was below the age of 10 years, and you have to go to the court with them, stand with them, and even if the judges whatever behavior they do, you have to give them strength. That was the internship all about. And I stood there, and my interview went very well. But the last question was this: can you do it? And I stood there that no, I don't have that mental health. I don't have that strength right now that I can deal with this. And something that I learned from that interview was that we really need to short it down and put it that what exactly I want to do. I'm starting this women's organization group in my college, that is Women with Wings. And working with the project, I am actually trying to have a conversation with what discrimination they feel together and what they want to change in it. So I think feminism is very vast, and just once jot it down and research, and then you can apply for internship. Even One Future collective that I was mentioning, they have leadership, feminist leadership. So if you are working with feminist leadership, you want to know about it more, you can go and talk to them. They're having a lot of workshops right now as well.
Yeah, Hemakshi.
Quickly add to what I posted two links in the chat. One is a broad resource of social sector fellowships. It's a list of all fellowships. There's a mid-career job, and Arthan itself is a job portal for the social sector, and it is super comprehensive. So I just want to point everyone towards that because it just compiles a lot of resources. I have a lot to say about feminism, but I will probably someone can connect with me later.
We will also in our blog share your email IDs and people could write to you. So Mansi, please connect with Ishita and Hemakshi. There's one more thing I want to add, and this is for everyone. See, there is a very fascinating concept these days called the Netflix phenomena, that we are all browsing for that perfect show to show up. And there is nothing called the perfect show. So please pick up the first show you got, watch it, enjoy it, and then try it again next day. And our youngsters and the entire plethora of choices is playing with our minds. This is psychologically proven. Plethora of choices will only create unhappiness. So my suggestion is pick one, as Ishita says, narrow it down to, let's say, X in feminism. Pick one, move on, learn, and there are plenty of resources as we go along. Great answers. There's a question from a listener to me privately that there are many obstacles you all experience, like lack of resources, lack of money. So how do you deal with such obstacles and challenges and risks? Jonathan, you want to take that?
Um, sure. So I think this answer is pertaining to this question and a little bit to the previous question as well, but not just feminism. How do you start anywhere in the development sector, or even in the development sector once you started and you're stuck with a lack of resource, a lack of finance? How do you proceed from there? Right? And I would say the answer to everything is reaching out to people and collaborating, and there is no other option. Because people spend so much of time filtering through resources, doing their research, right? It's mindless if everyone has to go through that process. So I would say whenever you're stuck, right, in any stage of your life, just reach out to someone who you believe has a little more information than you on this, right? Founders of a lot of organizations are very, very accessible. Preferably try to reach out to those organizations that don't have too much of red tape in position, right? Like, say, if you were to reach out to an organization like the WWF and you mail the CEO, it's unlikely that you're going to get a reply without any connection. I mean, you might, and go ahead and try it. But if you reach out to a smaller organization, they're very willing to help. We're also closer to the point of not forgetting that we came from a point of vast confusion not too long ago, right? So if we don't have resources, we try to partner with an organization that does have those resources. If we need access to funding, we reach out to mentors. We reach out to others that might have that access to funding and try to form some sort of collaborative circle over there. But you see that if you were to do a little systems thinking approach to any intervention that you take, like I'm in the education sector, and I do think that it's a little ridiculous to try to bring education to a child who's hungry, right? So education and nutrition go hand in hand. And we've decided that we will not enter a school unless we can find a nutrition partner to enter that school with us. So that could be seen as a resource scarcity and also a scarcity in expertise, right? We do not have expertise in nutrition, food delivery, or the supply chain that's required to have this kind of access. But there are organizations that are doing that. And piecemeal interventions come together to form an holistic intervention and some sort of exuberance.
Yeah, fair enough. Good answer. Lieutenant Commander Manoj Reddy asks a question that he's posted in Chennai. In the forces, we face a lot of problems ranging from their second career, and there are too many opportunities, but then there are many other ranks and not officers. He has visited many corporates, but nobody is helping. How should one go about it? The problems are galore in this sector. How should I start in this sector? I'll probably take that question. It is not relevant to a social sector. I think it is a larger career discussion. My request to you, Colonel, would be that a very big part of a very big part of career management is being aware of these things. And the armed forces and defense forces, security services have a problem that the retirement is at 58, which is a very prime of your life, and then suddenly you don't have a job. Some people go there for short service commission and then come out for a job. I think it's a skilling issue. Does anybody, three of you, have any view on this? Because I personally feel it is not related to a social sector; it's a skilling issue. But I'm open to your ideas.
Just like anecdotal examples, because I recruit now, and when we are looking for a leadership person, like my immediate thought is army and armed forces. And even in the social sector, I've met a lot of head of organizations where army people are employed because of their administrative skills, their discipline, and their leadership commitment that they have. But this is anecdotal data. What I know is the armed forces like IS is a very connected network. So what Jonathan said earlier, reach out to people, reach out to other forces people. I think that advice in general is the golden advice for all career, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I also have a view on that, that I feel that there is a tremendous amount of organized sector that looks at people coming out of the defense forces, and it has been happening for decades. And if there is a challenge, it needs to be discussed at a different level, may not be a fit for at least my knowledge and maybe the work I do. There is one more interesting question from a listener who says that I'm from Gulf. Here, the kids don't have opportunity for social work, or it's very less. They don't see the people at the bottom of the economy. What is the best way to keep the youngsters so that they are inspired to do social work? I think it's a great question. Anybody would like to take it?
I would love to. This is, sorry, I also speak a lot. I'll try to keep it short. One of my favorite organizations is called Reap Benefit. It's based in Bangalore. What they do is they work with young people to make them problem solvers. And these are young people in private schools, etc. They can be 8th grade, as young as 8th grade, and they become problem solvers for problems around them. They don't need to solve the policy problem of India's education crisis or the poverty. No one is picking up garbage next to me. What can I as an 8th grader do about it? Do I know who is in charge of it? Yes, the counselor is in charge of it. Okay, there is a leakage in the garden next to me. What can I do? Can I write it in a newspaper? They just look them up, Reap Benefit, and there are people, I mean, the kids who do this are called Sol Ninjas. I will give one example. There is a girl called Vibha. She got in touch with Reap Benefit when she was in 9th grade. What she started was, because she was studying in a high-end private school, she became sensitive to that everyone is not like them or as privileged as them. One of the, I think the biggest problem of our society is the bubbles we live in, hence the apathy that we end up creating. I will include me, the first time I went to a slum was after my 12th grade, and that's not okay because my society, 70% of the country lives in those slums. So there is something so wrong in the education system which is not exposing me to the reality of my own country. But that's a separate discussion. So what Vibha did in 9th standard is she started an exchange program. This is a 9th grader running an exchange program between the most high-end schools of Bangalore and the government schools, so that they get to know each other and learn from each other. Not, oh, I'm private school, I'll teach you English. No, you know so many life skills that I have no idea of because of my privilege, right? This was in 9th grade. Then she went on to work with Pratham on their bridging program. Then she went to Armenia and she as 11th grader, and she continued her journey with these small things that she was doing. She was speaking to a global audience about what she as a young change maker has done. Now she is in National Law School, Bangalore. She has started her own organization called Outlawed, which talks about citizen participation and giving legal literacy to disadvantaged population. So it doesn't have to be a big step like making a career change or taking a job. Your journey as a change maker can start today, whether you're in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, because like Rakesh Bhaiya said, young people have a lot more empathy. So start now. And as a parent, I would say that give them the opportunity. I think one thing I always say is please don't make your kids grow up in a bubble, because that's the biggest disservice you can do to your child, because the world out there is not as easy. Make them resilient, show them the reality, but also give them the tools to deal with it.
I'm going to take a dig at it. Many people who live in these bubbles do send the kids to the slums, but with all the right gear and everything else, which is even more disastrous. And sometimes I just stay away from such parents that, hey, for heaven's sake, why are you doing this?
Poverty tourism, it's called.
Poverty tourism. Actually, there is one more, and I must tell you this. It is also about, hey, I want my child to go abroad, and abroad universities love a child who, has gone to a slum. I mean, this is so sickening sometimes. And anyway, that could be another webinar we should all do on.
How about Rakesh, I just want to add a thought to what you pointed out. It's so important because when I started doing the when I was selected for the Mother Teresa Fellowship, they took us to Janta Colony in Chandigarh, a whole bunch of us, and they just left us there and said, "We'll see you in a couple of days." All right, so we had to go around and make friends with the kids and figure out uh, our accommodation and everything to that extent. And of course, the cohort was selected based on a lot of sensitivity, right? So they also knew that we weren't just going to go around disrupting things. But there was a lot that we learned while we were over there in our attempt to be um, as a part of the community as possible. And when we left, one of my mentors asked us a question: "What have you taken away from your visit?" Okay, and he didn't mean it in the sense as what have we taken to benefit, but what have we deprived the community of by being there. And I thought that was such a reflective and important question, because in our attempt to learn, or our attempt to get that experience, that attempt for me to figure out how students learn in their homes, in these sort of slums, what does their day look like? It was a gold mine in terms of experience, right? But I was also thinking about it hadn't crossed my mind until that question, am I making the community used to people coming here and leaving? Could I have benefited? Did I benefit more than I let them benefit from this particular situation? And of course, there's no right and wrong over here, but it's definitely something to think about before we get in. And in the same fellowship, we got another experience where a head of a very large foundation was saying that he went to a village and found that women used to walk miles and miles before they could get water. So he said, I'm going to dig a well over here and I'm going to leave. I don't want credit, nothing like that. So he dug the well and he left. Now he came back to the village a couple of years later, and he didn't expect praise or anything, but he at least expected people to be using the well, right? He came back and the women of the well started to throw the women of the village started to throw their slippers at him and say, "That's the guy who built the well." And he was shocked. He said, "What is the water quality bad? Did I do something wrong?" And they explained to him that their husbands are extremely abusive. And if it would take them 1 hour to walk that distance to fill the water, they would stretch it out for a span of 3 hours. And now that he brought the well into the village, they didn't have an excuse to be away from abusive homes. And it's so important that we ask before help to people.
Wow. No, I think you brought in a very different perspective, which is something I've heard from many of the kind of friends I have who work in that sector, that many of them, and this is something when I was in multinational companies, we would also go and do these experiments. One parent actually said this thing that, "Hey, now you've brought a computer, you've also brought a lot of problems for us. We were quite happy in our own world. So don't think that your resources are going to help us. You might damage us." And we did see some negative effects of sometimes good thinking, because you're not thinking for the social sector, you're thinking for your personal benefit, that I'm going to tell others that I'm also doing this awesome work. And sometimes it could backfire in all of us. So great example. I think that's amazingly said.
Keeping this logic in mind, Sonam Wangchuk charges you to volunteer with him, because he knows that you are going to benefit more than the kids. And I love the thought behind it.
I think he's brilliant, and only he can do this because he thinks like that. And I agree with that, because I think this whole abuse of social sector to get a job in New York and Bombay and London. And I've had fights with many students that they go for Teach for India not because they want to help a child. They go to Teach for India because they want to end up in an Ivy League in US. And the US universities play a very dirty game to bring these, to give more priority to such. So this has become like a machine now. And the social sector is also enjoying the funds keep coming. So I want to let everybody know that just like a sector, social sector has its fair share of problems. Grass is not green everywhere. And please also balance your passion, compassion, service to the fact that this is governed by human beings. Human beings are bundles of imperfection, and everybody is trying to do their job to the best of their ability. But this is not the picture perfect giving industry in its true sense. It has its fair share of bureaucracy, it has its fair share of corruption, it has its fair share of bad people who actually want money to do other things. So don't get too enamored by it just because everybody's talking about it. Last question, and there are some very good questions we are going to summarize in a blog and send it to you. Any 2 3 resources that you could, maybe a book or a movie, a podcast, because knowledge helps. Hemakshi has sent some very nice links. We're going to compile it. Avantika, please make sure you compile those links. But any 2 3 books, movies, resources that you could tell us that inspire us on the social sector? Ishita, you, Hemakshi, and Jonathan.
Just a second. Okay, so I also wanted to point out something from the last question, that, being a teenager, I know what parents are doing, and I would really like to recommend certain things. So my mother is extremely sensitive about everything. She does not even know that I went to the slum. So, and even Democracy Express, Hemakshi would know it better. When she wanted to visit the office, she wanted to know everything about the place. I called her 10 times in the day. She wanted to video call me. She wanted to make sure everything was fine. And this is a problem that I always faced as a child. My mother is like, she would always get in trouble because she's trying to save someone else. So, so I would really recommend parents to have an eye on their child, but also, let them be. So, for example, my teacher used to come and tell that Ishita wants to do everything. She wants to, go for the debate, go for everything. And my mother used to scold me that, why do you want to do everything? Why can't you, just be like a normal child and, just learn what's required? So I think that's a problem that everybody faces. And I would actually recommend watching certain things that can help you, which would be one movie that changed my perspective towards everything was Before the Flood. Before the Flood was one of the first things that I noticed that made me, it was like an eye opener that, okay, this is also happening in the world. Second would be, if you want to just summarize what women go through in workforces or as a whole, it would be Lean In, that today me and Hemakshi were talking about this book. It's just a beautiful book, and it talks to women, like what exactly they go through in workforces, the underrepresentation, and what needs to be done. Apart from that, there's this book, This Changes Everything. It's also on climate change, and it just changes your perspective about capitalism and how everything is linked to this one thing, that people want to gather more money. And something that just changed my perspective about how I look at things was this quote that I read somewhere, which said that if you want to contribute more and not accumulate more, that changes everything. So I don't want to accumulate more like my parents did. I want to contribute more to the society than my parents did. This is success for me, which is different from others. So I think this comes with the time you start watching documentaries. There's even feminism or feminist on YouTube. I mean, on Netflix, that shows a huge perspective about women. And yeah.
Excellent answer. Can you type it on our chat for everyone, Ishita, while the others are responding? Because we want to document this, and this is for my own learning as well. Hemakshi, your suggestions?
Yeah. So I think I learned a lot through documentaries. Again, Nero's Guest is one of my all-time favorite documentaries about the farmers' crisis. And then the book is also Everyone Loves a Good Drought. What it does is tells you how screwed up the system is. Like Jonathan said in his example, it's not as simple as we imagine. And do-gooders, English-speaking, degree-holding do-gooders are not going to solve the world. We really need to listen to the people because the system is not designed for them. And Nero's Guest hits that point home very, very starkly, but beautifully. So with children, I would advise that you watch it with your parents so that you can process it a little bit. I think books, if you're more of a development, RCT, Poor Economics is a good book to start with. If you're more of a heart person, then you may want to pick up stories that really, really speak to you. For me, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but Room to Read, the founder of Room to Read has written this beautiful book about the need for libraries and the need for books and the story of Room to Read. I remember reading that, and it really, really shaped how I think. Now that I'm a development sector professional, I read this blog called IDR religiously, because they have some of the best thinkers in the development sector, and they make short and long blogs, and they curate a lot of lists as well. So that's a blog that I read every single week, because it's exactly what my heart and mind need. So I definitely recommend IDR as a book. I'm a systems thinker, so there are more academic books that I would recommend, like The Fifth Principle, following the work of Donella Meadows, etc. But maybe that's a little later in the journey and not to start off the journey. So I would say documentaries are a great place to start, and Miro's Guest is definitely one of them.
Yeah, very good. If you can also document all these points, Ishita has done that. Jonathan, your answers?
Sure. So more than specific books, I would urge you to pursue great thinkers and try to see what they read, what they like. As Hemakshi mentioned, Donella Meadows is one of my favorite authors. I think she's able to take something extremely complex and simplify it. And as a woman, 40 years ago, was able to bring about paradigm shifts in both climate change and systems thinking or economics. I think it's just, she's a fabulous person. Even peace sign art, like she mentioned. There's a online magazine called The Ken. They focus on systems thinking, and they make connections which we usually don't see. I think it's decently expensive, but they have a free version. They have a free newsletter that they send you every day. I would also urge you to read authors other than the conventional white male authors, right? Look for women and listen to their perspective directly. Look for Dalit authors. Look for people who have actually experienced all of these things that the more famous authors talk about. And it gives very interesting perspectives, very different ways of looking at this. And a very light, easy documentary to start with would be Inside Bill's Brain. I'm not sure if I got the name correct, but it's on Netflix, and
it is.
It's quite motivating to just start off with and then get into a book or something after that.
I'm going to recommend this Netflix series called India's Daughter, which is a 4-part series about Shanti Niketan. It's a brilliant but definitely watch it.
Oh, absolutely gold mine that is. I've seen that. I think this was an amazing conversation.
I have a question.
Yes.
Don't mind. So, Hemakshi, running the Indian School of Democracy, I think you become the perfect person to answer this question, because I get it from a lot of youth as well. So it's an apprehension on their parents' part as to, would activism get you in trouble, or would working with an NGO, anything like this, make the government come after you? And you working on such an important topic like democracy, I'm sure that's been a concern for you and your parents as well, and just address it to everyone out there.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's a very tough question. I think I'm too rebellious and too old for my parents to now worry about me. So I don't know what my parents, they did worry, but I think they were always convinced that jo bhi karegi, like she'll think it through. But I'll answer from my perspective and how I think of this risk. I've been in meeting with the top corporate heads of the country, and they have said, you are going to die if you continue doing this work. And I don't even think I'm doing that radical work. I'm just trying to nurture leaders for politics. And we are a non-partisan organization, so I'm not associated with any political party, but I have been said, as a woman especially. That aside, I think anything that you do with passion, especially in the social sector, is dangerous, right? If you look at Kunal Kamra, I worry for Kunal Kamra because he makes a lot of anti-government jokes, and we can all laugh about it. But it's not easy for anyone in the country, whichever side of the government you stand for, to say something so against government, because it's difficult. So no, that danger exists, but also the courage exists within you. You just need to know how to harness that courage. But at the same time, don't be foolish, right? Like, don't go into a chief. That stands true as life advice, right? As a woman, I live in Delhi. I don't go out at 2 a.m. by myself. So that's a precaution I take. I do take 4 a.m. flights. I just have systems. I use my privilege. I take an Uber. I make sure someone is tracking my rides. Something as simple as that applies to your career as well. If you want to last in the long run, don't be explosive. My professor used to say this, right? There's a spectrum of delicate. If you're too soft, if you're a bystander, you're not going to be able to make a change because you're too soft. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum, which is explosive, you're going to explode and die, and nothing around you is going to change. So you need to understand what is the sweet spot on the spectrum so that you're not exploding. And that wisdom comes from listening to people. So don't stop listening. Consider the pros and cons of an action and think of the long term. This social sector, more than anything, is a long-term game. So you need to survive, and this applies to your own mental health, your own, how are you taking care of yourself, and the actions you are doing. So don't go and bang on doors when you know that your police is going to come after you. Be smart, think of smart ways of doing things. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I got a question on private that I would like to address, if that's fine. So it's from a parent who wants to ask that she just exposes her child to right-wing thoughts and what she can do about it. So I think, and because it does not, the left is or does not fetch you money. So I would actually say that, to be honest, you should expose your child to all kind of thoughts. My thoughts do not align with my parents, or, especially my mother, because she has given me that choice of, looking at the spectrum. So if you don't expose your children to LGBTQ or, leftist thought, what socialism is, what communism is, then they won't know what they are opting for. They are just following you. And I think, if somebody or a child even is blindly following you, what you're doing, then it would be more like a copy of you that does not create something of their own. It's not individualism. So I would actually say that let him or her choose whatever they want to, and just expose them with care. In the end, they will get to know about this. It's not that you can just keep them in the box. So I think you should, it's better if they get to know about all these thoughts from you. And it's not that social sector that does not fetch money. If you talk about Hemakshi, she is doing amazing. I know her, and I think she's getting enough. But on the other hand, if you want to buy a Mercedes, or you want storage building, then you can't own it with with working in social sector, because you would prefer having 1-bedroom set and having feeding 10,000 migrant workers rather than doing this. So I think it's more about what makes you feel fulfilled. For example, living with privilege that I'm living, it makes me guilty. So it makes me feel guilty, and I want to give back more than than I have. But I would always say that just expose her with your care so that she or he knows better.
No, fascinating. I think this has been such an enriching. I mean, I learned a lot. I never knew many of the books and resources that you have given us. I sincerely want to thank all of you, Ishita, Himakshi, and Jonathan. We are going to summarize this in the next 5-6 days. It will be on our YouTube channel. My colleagues Avantika, Ruben are there. We will send messages. But thank you. I think you're doing great service. All of you as parents and teenagers and professionals, do your bit. There are plenty of resources out there. Take one step. See if you can help at least Ishita, Himakshi, and Jonathan in their journeys. I will, and I will continue to do so. So thank you, everyone. Jonathan, Ishita, and Himakshi, thank you for your time. And all my parents and teenagers and my colleagues, thank you for giving us your time. Stay safe, stay indoors, take care of each other, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tan, for having us. See you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.